So, you chose Ranger. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but deadly when played right. Ranger rewards patience, awareness, and discipline. Rush in, press everything, and watch how fast you die. I'm Flanker, and this is the ultimate Ranger guide for Ashes of Creation Alpha 2. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more guides like this one. Ranger is a damage dealer designed to pressure enemies from a distance and quickly punish those who overextend or overcommit. They have solid single target damage as well as decent AoE burst potential. Certain abilities like Winefield and Party Stride essentially guarantee that most groups will want at least one Ranger in their composition. But we will get into the skills in more detail in just a minute. When it comes to weaknesses, one of the main issues is the lack of any viable self-sustain abilities such as healing or shields. However, that may change in the future with the implementation of secondary archetypes. Another drawback is that Ranger is far from the best class for 1v1 situations. Winning a duel against a similarly geared and skilled rogue, bard, or tank for example will be quite difficult. Now, let's take a detailed look at the active and passive abilities in the Ranger's kit and also talk about various rotations. As usual, we start with the basics. Like many other archetypes, Ranger has its own unique resource called Focus. It allows you to deal up to 15% additional damage depending on how much focus you have at the moment of casting an ability. There are three ways to accumulate it: passive regeneration, using weapon combo finishers, and the power shot ability. Focus is consumed when using abilities in proportion to the total amount of damage dealt. This means that when hitting multiple targets with AoE abilities, your entire focus bar can be depleted in just 2 costs, since total damage across all targets is taken into account. Rangers have access to a set of toggle abilities called hunts, each representing a different animal spirit, bear, raven, or tiger, and granting a specific offensive buff while active. These hunts interact directly with the Mark Prey ability. When Mark is used, it temporarily transforms the active hunt into a debuff on the enemy, applying effects like reduced mitigation, evasion, or critical avoidance. After the Mark expires, the debuff ends and the Ranger receives a temporary defensive buff based on the same hunt, boosting mitigation, evasion, or critical avoidance respectively. There are several things you need to keep in mind when it comes to using marks properly. First of all, when you activate Mark Prey, you temporarily lose the effect of your active hunt. Pay attention to my crit chance and crit avoidance in this clip. As soon as I use Mark, my crit chance drops by 10% while the target receives the debuff. Once the mark expires, my hunt becomes active again and I regain my 10% crit chance along with a temporary 25% bonus to crit avoidance. Based on this, a few important conclusions can be made. First of all, know your target. If you're running Hunt of the Tiger and your mark reduces the target's critical avoidance, ask yourself what's more valuable, keeping the flat 10% crit chance bonus or applying the debuff. Not many players stack high crit avoidance, which means using Mark may sometimes be counterproductive. Second, Mark only applies its debuff to one target, while the Hunt buff affects your output against all enemies. So, if Hunt of the Tiger is active and you're about to burst multiple enemies with AoE abilities, using Mark beforehand might be a bad call. You'd be trading your 10% crit chance bonus across all targets for a single target debuff. And that kinda sounds like the worst deal in the history of deals. Third, remember that you get the defensive buff from Mark in 2 cases: when it expires or when the marked target dies. It means that in PvE or PvP, you can mark a low HP enemy that's about to die in a second and get your defensive buff almost instantly, while only losing your active hunt for a moment. Considering how stats and diminishing returns currently work, it generally makes sense to pick one hunt and adjust your stats accordingly. Personally, I prefer to use Hunt of the Tiger since it's the most versatile. It gives a flat 10% crit chance, which is useful in almost any situation. On the other hand, Hunt of the Bear isn't bad either, especially with its debuff and the temporary mitigation buff you get after the mark expires. However, even though the tooltip says it increases penetration by 10%, that doesn't seem to be the case in practice, most likely due to diminishing returns. As for Hunt of the Raven, I honestly struggle to imagine a scenario where it's better than the other hunts. Maybe in a 1v1 against a rogue, but I doubt it would make much of a difference. In any case, if you have thoughts or experience using other marks, feel free to share them in the comments. After the stealth mechanic overhaul, camouflage became more effective and reliable. It doesn't make you fully invisible, but it makes you very hard to see, especially from a distance or while standing still. In addition, you cannot be targeted by enemy players while under its effect. In most cases, camouflage is used in combination with either minefield or snipe. In the first case, it gives you protection from direct attacks and allows for more precise placement of minefield. In the second, it lets you cast snipe without drawing attention, making you less vulnerable during the channel and reducing the chance that your opponent will notice and dodge it. As for PvE, camouflage can often help you avoid aggro from hostile mobs, but not always. In some situations, it simply doesn't work. And I wasn't able to figure out why, even after testing. It could be distance, line of sight, mob level, or something else entirely. Sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. Thorns is one of the ranger's toggled buffs. Once applied, it deals a small amount of damage to attackers and has a 10% chance to apply bleed on hit. In group content, it's usually cast on the tank since they take the most hits, and those extra bleeding procs are essentially free passive damage. Thorns can also be applied to a caravan, which makes it a bit more annoying for attackers, especially if they don't have a cleric or bard in the group. Regeneration is another one of ranger's toggle buffs that, you guessed it, slightly increases the target's health regeneration. This ability can be upgraded with a passive that grants additional HP and mana regen while dealing damage to a marked target. Personally, I don't use it, mainly because mark usage is highly situational right now, and spending a skill point on that passive doesn't feel worth it, considering there are better options available. In any case, just like with Thorns, regeneration is usually applied to the tank, unless you've chosen to learn the passive, and in this case, cast it on yourself. Strider and Party Stride are buffs that increase movement speed of a single target or your entire group by 10% for 15 minutes. Both abilities can be applied to mounts and caravans. For Party Stride to work on a mount or caravan, the group members must either be mounted or sitting in the caravan's driver's seat. If your group has multiple rangers, one Party Stride is enough, so the second ranger can allocate their skill point elsewhere. Bonus tip, if you see a caravan on the road, you can do a good deed. Sign up as a defender, cast Strider on it, and leave the event. The owner will appreciate it. Rangers have access to 3 toggled abilities that enhance their arrows and apply one of the 3 status effects to targets: dazed, bleeding, or snared. We'll go over them briefly now and cover them in more detail when discussing offensive ranger abilities. Personally, I use concussion ammo by default in PvP. The dazed debuff is especially effective against casters, though it doesn't do much against physical classes. But still, using it allows you to silence your enemy with Thundering Shot, which makes it useful in any matchup. Additionally, both Dazed and Silence status effects provide increased physical penetration for Headshot. Barbs are the go-to choice for PvE, maximizing raw damage output. On rare occasions, when my group or raid already has enough rangers running concussion ammo, I might switch to barbs in PvP too, but it doesn't happen often. As for the wait option, which applies snared, I might consider it in certain 1v1 scenarios, and that's pretty much it. Applying Snared too often in PvE or PvP can actually backfire. Snared and Chilled both trigger the same status immunity, which prevents further, slows or freezes for 10 seconds. That might not be a big deal for you, but it's a problem for your mages. If you trigger the immunity, the target can't be chilled, which means mages can't freeze it and use their Shattered combo. So unless you want to hear 10 unfiltered opinions about yourself and your family members, don't screw your mages over. Alright, we finally made it to the offensive abilities, and let's begin with Salvo. It comes with 6 charges, each dealing 50% damage for a total of 300%. Not bad at all. Salvo is one of the abilities that apply a status effect from your enhanced ammo toggle, but there is a key detail. Only the first salvo charge applies the debuff. For example, if you're using weight ammo, it doesn't matter whether you hit the target with 1 or all 6 charges. The target will only get 1 stack of snared. That said, applying multiple stacks is still possible. One way is to interrupt the salvo animation by dodging and then casting it again to trigger the debuff one more time. Another option is simply to use the first available charge repeatedly. Since the cooldown per charge is only 3 seconds, it's very doable. Since only the first charge applies your enhanced ammo debuff, you can also use salvo to apply status effects to multiple enemies by quickly switching targets mid-cast, making each shot land on a different enemy. This can be helpful when targets are spread out, although if they are grouped, it's better to use scattershot instead. Last but not least, salvo does come with a minor issue. Occasionally, the ability gets bugged, locking you in the animation. The only way to break free is to dodge out of it, which is especially frustrating in PvP. Luckily, it doesn't happen often, but still, it's something to be aware of. Scattershot is another ranger ability that applies status effect from your enhanced ammo toggle. It comes with two upgrade options. One gives you an additional charge, and the other unlocks a charged or a concentrated version of the skill. Scattershot has a relatively short 10-second cooldown, but its effective range is limited to 20 meters. Charged Scattershot can be a solid pick in PvE and sometimes in PvP as well. That said, I personally avoid using it because of the longer cast time and a known bug where you might accidentally cast the charged version when you intended a quick one, or the other way around. In PvP, that kind of inconsistency is annoying and can cost you. Scattershot is frequently used in AoE burst rotations, especially in PvP, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Finally, just like salvo, Scattershot's cooldown can be reduced by 3 seconds per weapon combo finisher, so weaving it in between basic attacks helps you cycle it more often. Disengage is a pretty useful ability for creating space between you and your opponent. If you manage to hit your target while using it, Disengage deals 100% physical damage and applies 1 stack of snared. There are 2 upgrade options. The first, Omnidirectional Disengage, is free, meaning you can unlock it without spending a skill point, and I would definitely recommend doing so. Instead of the default backflip, you'll be able to use Disengage in any direction, which makes it much more flexible, whether you're trying to escape, close a gap, or climb something. The second upgrade allows you to use Disengage a second time without triggering its cooldown, but only if you successfully hit someone with the first use. I don't usually pick it by default, but it can be very useful in 1v1s against melee classes or in small-scale PvP if you expect to get focused by a fighter, tank, or rogue. Unfortunately, Disengage also comes with one minor but very annoying issue. If you accidentally press sprint midair, then instead of landing where you intended, you'll get pushed backwards. So yeah, keep that in mind. Snipe is one of the most powerful abilities in the game, and it also comes with 2 strong passive upgrades. It deals 400% damage, applies the shaken status effect, and if the target is already bleeding, it also applies hemorrhaging. All of this from a 35-meter range. But that power comes at a cost. Snipe has a long cast time during which you can't move, and its animation is easy to recognize. A good player will see it coming and will absolutely try to dodge. The first passive grants a 30% increased chance to crit if your target is more than 20 meters away, which will be the case most of the time. The second one, Hasting Snipe, boosts your attack speed by 20% for 5 seconds, creating a single target burst window. Personally, I prefer to have them both since they complement each other well and make Snipe even deadlier when used properly. There are several situations where using Snipe makes perfect sense. It works great as an opener, especially against enemies who are not expecting it or can't see the moment of cast. The combination of the Shaken debuff, which reduces mitigation, and the attack speed boost creates a quick burst window that can deal massive damage right out of the gate. Snipe is also one of the few abilities that truly shine when used while camouflaged. Not only does it hide your casting animation, but it also makes you untargetable, meaning your enemy won't see your cast bar and will have a much harder time timing their dodge. Here are a few basic rotations that you might find useful. Opening with Snipe will deal a decent amount of damage, especially if it crits, but keep in mind that it also consumes a significant amount of focus. This makes Power Shot a great follow-up. Just like Snipe, it has a 35-meter range, and it helps you recover some focus, making it an efficient next step in your combo. What you do next depends on the target. Your intermediate goal is to bring your opponent's HP below 50% so that you can finish them off with 2 headshots. If Snipe and Power Shot were enough to achieve that, then continue with the first rotation. If not, you may need to throw in 1 or more additional abilities to push them into the kill range. Power Shot is a relatively new ability that was added just a few patches ago. Before its introduction, aside from Barrage, Rangers didn't have many offensive skills that dealt raw damage without prerequisites or setup. Power Shot filled that gap perfectly, and for a good reason. As I mentioned earlier, it has a 35-meter range and stands out as the only offensive ability that not only doesn't consume focus, but restores it. On top of that, you're not immobilized while casting it, the cast time is short, and the cooldown is only 10 seconds. Overall, Power Shot makes for an excellent follow-up to any opener. It not only keeps the pressure on, but also helps fuel your next abilities by restoring focus and increasing their damage. Additionally, thanks to its range, Power Shot can sometimes be used as an execute, especially if the target is trying to escape and you can't reach them with Headshot. Not gonna lie, Headshot is one of my favorite abilities in the Ranger's kit, and also one of the key reasons why I prefer using Dazed ammo. It deals 200% base damage with an additional 25% if target is below 50% HP. On top of that bonus damage, you also get increased penetration against targets that are dazed or silenced. As for upgrades, Mortal Headshot is an absolute must-have. It makes the ability even deadlier. The second upgrade used to be borderline useless back when marks had a 60-second cooldown. Now, I can see it being somewhat situationally viable, but it depends on which hunt you're running and how often you actually use the mark. Headshot is also one of the abilities you'll want to save your lightning reload for. Like I mentioned earlier, in many scenarios, your opening goal is to bring the enemy below 50% HP and then finish them off with a double headshot combo. Even if they survive that, then after 2 headshots, they'll be left with at least 4 or 5 stacks of wounded that will make their recovery harder. Thundering Shot is an ability that not only deals damage, but also applies shocked stacks to the target and enables you to silence them. With the upgrade, it becomes an AoE, but the number of shock stacks applied drops from 10 to 5, and only your primary target will get silenced. This ability is the main reason why it usually makes sense to run Dazed ammo. That status effect can be applied through combo finishers, salvo, or scatter shot. Since you won't always have time to set up Dazed through finishers, it's often easier and faster to use salvo. The good news is, you only need 1 salvo charge to apply a status effect, so it's almost always available. On top of that, once you fire the first shot, you can dodge cancel the rest of the animation and instantly follow up with Thundering Shot to apply silence with minimal delay. Since most classes have some form of CC break, which they're likely to use after your first silence, you can follow up with Lightning Reload to reapply it immediately. And because Thundering Shot also applies 5 or 10 shocked stacks, Barrage can be a decent follow-up. Its multiple projectiles will benefit from those stacks and deal extra damage. Alternatively, you can use Scatter Shot to apply Dazed and then follow up with Thundering Shot. Just keep in mind that Scatter Shot's range is only 20 meters, and you might also want to save it for your AoE burst. But if the situation calls for it, it's still a solid option. It casts almost instantly and doesn't require stamina like a dodge cancel would. A few additional notes about Thundering Shot. First, you can delay the moment it hits by turning your camera to the side while casting. This can be useful when you want Thundering Shot and another ability to land simultaneously for a tighter burst. Also, you might use this trick to apply shock right before a mage follows up with Frostbolt, helping them deal increased damage. Secondly, even if your enemy dodges the projectile and avoids the damage, silence will still be applied, which makes it even more valuable in PvP. Finally, while using Thundering Shot in mass PvP, make sure to choose your target wisely. Obviously, you want to hit as many enemies as possible, but keep in mind that if your primary target dies while the projectile is still in the air, the rest of the enemies will not take any damage. Honestly, there is not much to say about Barrage. It used to be a pretty strong ability before the Ranger rework, but it got somewhat nerfed afterwards. The cooldown was increased from 12 to 15 seconds, and the ability to reduce it with combo finisher was removed. The only remaining way now is to apply bleeding or hemorrhaging to the target first. Still, it remains a decent offensive skill for applying pressure, especially when your target has shocked stacks. However, the multiple projectiles can backfire. They make it easier for your enemy to recover stamina by dodging a few of them. That is because of the recuperation passive from the stamina skill tree. Lightning Reload lets you instantly reuse one of the several key abilities, ignoring its cooldown, which opens up some strong rotational possibilities. With a 60-second cooldown though, you need to use it strategically, don't waste it on minor moments. We already talked about a few basic rotations like the double headshot and double silence combos. Now let's move on to our AoE burst options, where Lightning Reload can be useful as well. These two AoE rotations are not drastically different. The choice depends on how risky your burst is and how much damage you're taking while staying close to your enemies. The first option lets you deal damage faster, since Scattershot costs almost instantly. However, it uses raining death only once, which means less total damage and fewer wounded stacks applied. On a side note, I personally do not use concentrated Scattershot because of the longer cast time and reduced number of targets hit, but feel free to experiment and see what works best for you. The second option works better when your team's push seems to be successful, you're in safe position and not taking much return fire. Saving lightning reload to use raining death twice gives you more overall damage and allows you to apply more wounded stacks on the enemies. Additionally, this option is perfect when your enemies try to block your burst with a tank wall, since raining death allows you to simply shoot over it. Speaking of walls, by the way, keep in mind that you can still land abilities even if your line of sight is blocked, as long as you jump at the end of the cast. Anyway, if everything goes well, you can continue your rotation with Thundering Shot, Airstrike, or even both, depending on your position and the flow of the fight. If staying close becomes too risky, or you need to fall back for some heals, just use Dodge or Disengage to create space. The next two AoE rotations focus more on Thundering Shot and Raining Death. If you make the same choice when it comes to ammo, all targets hit by your scatter shots will be dazed. It means that you can follow with a Thundering Shot that will not only deal damage, but also silence one of the targets. That said, if you decide to use this combo, make sure that you're targeting someone important. Shocked stacks applied by Thundering Shot allow Raining Death to deal 20% more damage, assuming those stacks are not consumed by your teammates' attacks before you finish casting. The second rotation, obviously if you're able to quickly switch targets, gives you the chance to silence two enemies and apply even more shocked stacks, increasing your odds of proccing bonus damage with Raining Death. There isn't much left to say about Raining Death, we already covered it earlier when discussing some of the rotations. It has a wide area of effect but comes with a long 45-second cooldown, so don't waste it randomly, hold it for the right moment. Airstrike is a mobility skill that launches you into the air and fires 3 projectiles downwards, dealing 150% damage and rooting all enemies who are already snared. Just like Raining Death, it has a long 45-second cooldown, which can't be refreshed by lightning reload. Since the TTK changes, Airstrike can now be used more aggressively in a wider range of situations. Being airborne not only lets you avoid melee swings and indirect damage, it also adds unpredictability. You can change direction mid-flight, forcing melee opponents to guess where you will land. It also opens up a simple but effective combo. When a melee enemy gets too close, hit them with Disengage to apply Snared, then follow up with Airstrike to root them in place, for a total of 250% damage plus CC. Finally, Airstrike can be used either to create or close distance. Combine Sprint, Jump, Airstrike, Disengage, and you'll cover 30 to 40 meters almost instantly by riding the momentum. This same combo can also be used to reach elevated positions or climb terrain that would otherwise be hard to access. Now it's finally time to talk about what is arguably the most important and powerful ranger ability, Minefield. It deals 125% damage and instantly roots all targets caught in its radius. Any bleeding targets are also afflicted with hemorrhaging. On top of that, Minefield has a massive 40-meter cast range, the longest cast distance of any ability across all archetypes. Once placed, the field remains on the ground for several seconds, continuing to deal damage and root anyone who accidentally steps into it. If you pick up the upgrade, Minefield will also apply multiple stacks of snare to all targets inside. This upgrade is generally worth having by default, though it's a good idea to check with your mages whether snare chill immunity will be a problem for them. At first glance, Minefield might not seem overwhelming, but in reality, it's insanely powerful in PvP across all scales. In many scenarios, using it correctly can guarantee a win for your team or swing the fight heavily in your favor. So now, let's go over a few specific use cases. Minefield can be used offensively when you're trying to root a large clump of enemy players and immediately follow up with an AoE burst. This approach requires coordination and clear communication. Your team needs to know the route is coming, where exactly it will land, and hold their AoE cooldowns for a fast, overwhelming follow-up. As a ranger, it is your responsibility to be vocal, and it is crucial. Here are a few examples.
Careful.
Root in 5, root in 5. Root mid incoming. Behind the wall. Root.
Yeah,
We can jump and bomb. Big bomba, big bomba.
Chain lighting this.
Place them now.
Go again.
Coming hard,
Let's go,
coming
boys.
hard.
Let's
Huge
go,
root on the
boys.
left.
Big root.
Huge
Big root on the left. Insane
Let's
root.
go.
Bombing.
Going.
They're all dying.
Shield, just go.
They're all dying.
Don't chill. You have shield.
Root.
Just keep pushing this.
Big
keep
root.
pushing
Big
this.
root in the
You're
middle.
winning,
Big root in the middle.
Yeah,
We can
go,
bomb.
go. Push it. Like
They all
here.
kicked. They all kicked in the middle.
Nice. I think that's GG. If they FF'd. Way too over.
Root is ready. Where do you want it?
Just want it like somewhere. Big group. Doesn't matter. Let's attack right side.
Left side rooted. Left side rooted. Left side rooted.
Yeah, nice.
All
Attack
low.
right and
All
attack
low.
right.
All low.
Nice, this is good. This is full send it. They FF. Go back. Don't kill.
Hopefully that gives you at least a general idea, and now let's move on to the next use case. Minefield can also be used defensively, usually in situations where you expect the enemy team to push. Rooting them at that moment can slow down their momentum and disrupt the timing of their engage. In some cases, you might even want to place Minefield behind the enemy front line, zoning out their backline and preventing them from following the push. That said, it all depends on the flow of the fight, your team's position, and the enemy's formation. Let me show you a few more examples.
They dive in us.
Mojo's out. Nice pull.
Rooting.
Walling.
In the middle, where they come from.
Also, all front center.
Mojo should die.
Fix.
We have Oscar in the back line. He's on the left now.
You have a bump. Back left. Back
Bomb. Group bomb now.
Okay.
I'm
watch
rooting
me,
the
watch me.
mountain. Do not push.
I'm
Just kill the stragglers. Kill the stragglers. And don't push
Nearest
up.
target. Get your longbow. Wait for
Go
cities.
mountain
We have...
two, go mountain two.
Finally, since Minefield can both root and snare enemies, it can also be used to delay their advance while your team is regrouping and setting up a formation.
To the west. They're engaging.
I see.
Okay, they're
Southwest.
pushing in.
Defensive route.
So we're in our chakra type. This is bad. Spread out a bit.
In conclusion, let's summarize the key points. Minefield alone is the reason why every single group should have at least one ranger. Every time you cast it, you need to have a clear goal in mind. What exactly are you trying to achieve with that route? This is your most important ability and it demands coordination. So call it out, let your team know it's coming, and make sure they understand what they're expected to do the moment it lands. Bear Trap is another ability in the Ranger's kit that allows you to root enemies. It comes with 2 upgrades, and I usually take both, but they aren't mandatory and mostly come down to personal preference. Traps work similarly to mines. You either want your target to step on them, or you want enemies to see the traps and avoid the area. They are great for zoning, especially if you have 3 charges, since traps persist on the ground for quite a while. They can also be quite useful in 1v1 fights against melee players, especially if you've picked the Trap Slinger upgrade. When someone gets close, you can throw a trap directly at their feet to root them instantly. Even if you miss, well, you've got 3 tries, so chances are 1 will land. Alternatively, if you're about to get jumped, you can scatter traps around yourself and play around them defensively. In many fights, you'll be forced to kite and move anyway, and sometimes your opponent might walk into one by accident. Finally, you can use traps to support your teammates. If you see that someone on your team is about to get focused by a melee player, toss a few traps around them. Sometimes it can even save their life. Unfortunately, I don't have a clip with a good example, but hopefully you'll get the idea after watching this one.
Ow.
Trap on you. Okay, another trap on you.
Fuck, you suck.
Okay, he's on me now.
That's the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Call of the Wild is the ability that will save your life a lot of times since it's our one and only CC break. It comes with a must-have upgrade that you should always invest into. In addition to CC break, it also grants 8 seconds of immunity to movement impairing effects such as snared and chilled. In certain situations, you might want to use it for that purpose alone. For example, during a 1v1 against a mage. If they can't apply chilled, you won't get frozen, which means no shatter combo. Since mage doesn't really have any other CC apart from Slumber that has a long cast time and can be easily dodged, those 8 seconds might be enough to win the fight. Finally, Call of the Wild can be used for a 20% movement speed buff, whether you need to disengage fast or chase someone down. Just keep in mind, the ability has a 30-second cooldown, so if you burn it for mobility and get CC'd right after, you're out of options. When playing in groups or raids, Ranger is usually one of the main candidates for receiving the mage buff enchant weapon. Depending on the element, this buff can give us one of the 3 enchants: ice, lightning, or fire. The ice buff deals 70% direct damage and applies chilled, but as always, make sure that your mages don't mind you doing that. The lightning buff deals less damage but applies volatile, which reduces magical mitigation by 15%. Fire is used the least since other options are simply better. In any case, don't forget to ask your mages for this buff. You'll not only be able to deal more damage, but also debuff enemies for them. I often get questions about my skill tree, weapon skill tree, and build. And surely, I can show you what mine looks like at the moment, but does that mean you should copy it? Absolutely not. As much as I'd like to help, showing one or even multiple options might not only fail to help you, it could actually do more harm than good. My skill trees change pretty frequently, sometimes even multiple times a day, depending on the situation, my group composition, the enemies we are facing, and other variables. Additionally, some parts of the weapon skill tree, like Heartseeker for example, were not working as intended, which only complicates things further. I've seen Heartseeker mentioned in one of the recent patch notes, but I haven't tested it myself yet, so I cannot comment on it. The only advice I can confidently give: start with something and then adjust your trees according to your playstyle, your preferences, and the kinds of encounter you are facing. As for gear and the build overall, I will likely make a separate video on that topic. Right now, I'm on page 27 of the script, so I think it makes more sense to cover it next time. At this stage, for beginners, I would suggest aiming for somewhat balanced stats to begin with. And just like with skill trees, experiment and find out what works best for you. No build, except the one you create and fine-tune yourself, will let you fully unlock the potential of your character. There is also another classic dilemma: longbow or shortbow. And under the current conditions, there is a clear winner. When it comes to PvP encounters, longbow will outperform shortbow in the vast majority of situations. The main reason is range. Longbow has a 35-meter attack distance, while shortbow caps at 30 meters. Since most PvP players run with longbow, choosing shortbow is a risky bet right now. Don't get me wrong, it can still work in some 1v1 situations or small-scale PvP. But even then, shortbow basic attacks are essentially free stamina for your opponent, since dodging at least some of those projectiles isn't that difficult. I know it's been a long video, but please bear with me for another minute. What I've shared with you today is the basics, and if you have anything to add, you're welcome to do that in the comments. Any good thoughts or suggestions will be added to the pinned comment, so if you're watching this video weeks after publication, consider checking them out. There, you will also find a link to my private Discord server where you can ask me questions directly. And of course, nothing is stopping you from doing that in the comments. I want to give a special thanks to Verra from the Federation Guild, who kindly agreed to be my assistant for this video. Also, I want to thank everyone who came to hang out with me during the May stream marathon. I streamed for nearly 260 hours in total, which would not have been possible without you and your support. So, big thanks to all my Twitch subs and YouTube sponsors. If you want to join our friendly community, feel free to follow me on Twitch too, the link is in the description. If this video was helpful, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more news and guides. I am Flanker, and I'll see you soon.